It feels like a million years since I made my last set of videos. It's been about 2, maybe 3 weeks now, so it feels a little awkward every time I come back now to start making these videos. When you get out of that rhythm, I'm not necessarily back like I've mentioned in the comment boards, but I will like to do something like this where I'll just come in and make a little news report here. Um, like I said before, I haven't really covered, or not covered, but followed the news. So the last time I made videos, between then and now, I haven't paid attention to any of the news. I'm completely oblivious to a lot of the things. But I still have the ability to take a bunch of different articles and try to make some kind of news story out of it. Um, Something that I saw, and I'll get into these. I have pretty interesting articles and stories for you here. Is a theme of it has to do with a financial theme, which is class warfare. It's one of many tactics that we all know that are used by the elites against people, against whoever, masses of people, to do what they're going to do. And basically, the financial system as we know it uh, was designed to lead to where it's going, which is, things are bad. It's complete consolidation into fewer and fewer hands, wealth, income. And so many people think that that you can somehow, this is like a failure of the voting system. You can, it's not the system itself, it's just that the system's bad right now and we can do something to fix it. So they're going to keep trying to resurrect that. And believe in that, that dream, or the American dream, or what they think they have, which is called democracy, or free markets as far as the economy goes and finance. That's more on the left. So you might have some kind of Occupy Wall Street type thing that will be created from the top down. And then on the right, you'll have more of an engineering of the 10% of conservatives and militias, like I've mentioned before, the whole Bundy thing. Um, and that's why I made that video, which probably offended people, which was the whole Bundy standoff thing is about the right to profit, and so that's just how I kind of interpreted that whole thing. So they got that going on the right, which is you're encroaching on my ability to profit, or you're encroaching on my ability to have privacy, which we all know it's not going to exist when a government exists. So this financial consolidation and financial oppression or political oppression is always going to exist in these when this system continues to exist. With that being said, to this article here with Assad, the Syrian people and the government were able to hold these elections, and I've covered Syria pretty extensive over the last couple of years because we all know that what it really was terrorists basically being used as mercenaries for globalists, mostly in the West, but who knows where else, to create instability, to overthrow the Assad regime, and to impose their own whatever puppet government. It's all about finance. Set up a central government, have them take on huge amounts of debt, have McDonald's on every corner and stuff. They lose their culture and they get this new culture called Americanism, but it has nothing to do with the nation state of America. It's about consumerism, just another step of enslaving people. So that's why they always say, oh, the brutal regime of Assad. Well, at the same time, their people are so far advanced in this system that I was talking about that they'll just enslave themselves, or they'll oppress themselves without even knowing it. So they don't have a democracy there where, in Syria, just like we don't. They pretty much have the same type of political system as far as it being indirect democracy. So, the people participate in voting for someone, but they're not actually participating in the economy or in politics with the nitty-gritty. Basically, the decision-making process of things. The Syrian people, or whichever ones are left that didn't leave, they did what most Americans do, which most Western Europeans, what they do, which is they voted. Basically, this right here, by voting for Assad, was a vote against the U.S. and whatever puppet they were going to put in there. That's basically what they did. But kudos to Assad and whatever militias that were formed in Syria, as far as the Syrian people go, that were able to fend off Western capitalists or Zionists or whatever elements that were involved here. They actually say here, holding the presidential elections itself is a great Syrian achievement as a foreign conspiracy, planned to control the key cities of, we all know, the ones in order to prevent holding the vote. That was the biggest thing. Get these terrorists destabilized and prevent an actual vote, because then it'll show that the Syrian people don't want what the West is selling. So it's just kind of funny to see John Kerry of the U.S. saying the Syrian presidential vote is meaningless. His reasons were it cannot be considered fair because you can't have an election where millions of people don't even have the ability to vote. So just right off the bat, I think most of you know where I'm going with this, but it wasn't until 1965 that blacks were allowed to vote, not being 1/3 of a person, or whatever it was. So not too long ago, right? That was probably what, millions, or at least close to millions of people that couldn't vote. 1920, that's when women were actually able to vote. So again, not really too long ago. In the U.S.'s short history, homeless people, it wasn't until the 80s that they allowed them to start voting, because they didn't have home addresses. So who the hell is Kerry and who the hell are we to start telling other people about what system they need? Kerry said the conflict is the same, the terror is the same, and the killing is the same. So in other words, this election didn't do anything, everything's the same, didn't change anything. So again, you can say the same thing about the U.S. political system and their elections, the primaries they just had. Not going to really change much. It's also kind of hypocritical because, the U.S. was the whole Benghazi Gate kind of overshadowed the real truth, which was that the U.S. CIA were actually funneling Stinger missiles and all kinds of weapons to terrorists in Libya to go into Syria and create this destabilization operation. They called them, of course, rebels, so that they couldn't actually hold this vote. This whole thing could have been to prevent this vote from taking place, among other things. Running natural gas pipelines, that's kind of the secondary thing, like in Ukraine. Also the same in Ukraine. Yeah, what you're seeing is what? They're calling it a Cold War. I saw this article. Here it is. How and why the U.S. has restarted the Cold War. So, again, a Cold War. Now, this is the more, like I said, a more modern system, a political system of creating consumers instead of citizens, just citizens. You also have a new form of war. Not just psychological war, but then these terror proxy wars, where you have big economic empires such as the West with their incentives of natural gas, getting that into Europe, basically funding terrorists and training them openly in Syria, but also in Ukraine. So we all know that this was a big operation to get rid of the Russian regime that was in there, that was working for, of course, their corporate interests. So there's a lot of convoluted stuff going on here, and you've got these people that are militias that are being played. They're being used, and they're being directed by probably the Kremlin and in the other parts, the pro-West, Ukraine and Kiev, whatever, by the CIA and by MI6 or whatever it is, 5. But I think you get my point. Terrorist proxy wars, and like I mentioned before, in the last couple of years, when they're done with Syria, or maybe they lost with Syria, they'll move towards Russia's doorstep, which is exactly what they've done. Ukraine is that's pretty much there, and they'll use terrorists to do this. So despite what you have been told, Libya actually had a pretty close, a lot closer in the U.S. probably than to direct democracy instead of representative democracy. And how are they doing now, right? Not too well. New democracy isn't working out too well for them economically or politically. That's right. They have a bunch of international, different foreigners of terrorists inside Libya. So it's not, again, and they're moving into Syria and they're moving out to other places, whether it's Afghanistan or near Russia, Dagestan, and that. So the West has created all these terrorists. They have little hubs where they can go and be trained in that, and they're arming them, giving them, and feeding them intelligence, and of course supporting them with all the propaganda. Then you have, oh, they're going to come back to Europe, right? So now they're not just them, a threat to Russia and all that, but basically they're a threat to the U.S. and to the EU, they're saying. Now they're complaining. U.S. spy chief says number of foreign militants in Syria rises, so they've increased. They still call them rebels, but they're being trained to return home and conduct attacks. And that legitimizes this, police state or increased surveillance of basically people who are dissenters, people who are questioning or saying that this system, this democratic system, is no longer legitimate for them. So, and they will, of course, be considered homegrown terrorists. And this is where the engineering of the 10% on the right comes into play, where they'll be kind of play into the hands of these same people that they're supposedly against. And towards the end of the operation, maybe they'll just start infighting, right? Like these guys, the 60 terrorists killed in Syria, infighting, so the terrorists can't really get along. They're all from different regions of the world with all different ideologies, so it was never meant to do that, just create destabilization, kill a bunch of people, but also refugees, which you're seeing in the Ukraine. Another thing about moving masses, basically moving a lot of people who are homogeneous or have the same culture, the same genetics, uprooting them, moving them away from their home where they have ties to, something that they would fight for, and moving them somewhere off in a different part of the world, right? Which is why you see a lot of these people that are from the Middle East not really going to somewhere else in the Middle East, but going to, say, North America or the EU. That those cultures will clash, and then of course, the funding of the terrorists going back to Europe, that makes for a sticky situation. And of course, if you don't like that, you're a racist. If you're against the immigration or massive immigration, open immigration of these people. So this would probably be a two-parter maybe. But so I don't want to say this is the first time, but this is kind of big though, right? This is the first time it's not actually Arabs, or Middle Easterns, or Africans, fleeing, right? Being refugees. Seen massive amounts of Africans sinking on boats heading into Europe, and Arabs and Middle Easterns heading into the U.S. or Europe. But now maybe this is the first time, right? This is the next phase of the operation here. I think Europe's done, as we know it, Western Europe mostly. There's still a lot of fight in them, and they have a lot better of a chance than, say, the U.S. Americans from actually changing the system, becoming freer, having more participation, because they have ties to that land. They have a history there. Long history, not just 200 years. Again, which is why they bring in foreigners who have no ties to the land, and it's just going to be easier to control them. Eastern Europe, and including, I guess you could say, Russia, they're even more resistant to globalists because they've been living in economic decay. Of course, you have dictatorships and stuff to represent these big corporations. In other words, the globalists, they're done with Western Europe. They got what they want there. Now it's time to move to Eastern Europe. And possibly even the United States, talking about, uprising or revolution. They're calling, to call it a hot war or a cold war is not fitting because it's a hot war, right? We just seen this article, 181 people killed, almost 300 injured in Kiev military op in eastern Ukraine. 2 Ukraine helicopters shot down. So definitely, this is people dying. This is not a Cold War. We'll talk more about this in the second video. Obama announces a $1 billion fund increase military deployments to Europe for Ukraine. It's not Obama, it's the people that put him there, whether it's natural gas or whoever. Please join me in part 2. This is GGN. Thank you.